Okay, the stream should be back now. I was having some technical difficulties. My internet connection seems to be dropping out. But hopefully people will rejoin. Robot Lady, let's continue where we left off. You told me a little bit about the three curates from Shirley, a work by Charlotte Bronte. That's where Lewis was talking about how dull his conversation was with his two other conversation partners that night. He goes on to say, I came home and took Pat for a walk in Cuckoo Lane. In at 5:30, Bradley and Gordon Clark came. The former does nearly all the talking. He is a nephew of Appearance and Reality. Here, this is by F.H. Bradley, a work by F.H. Bradley, published 1893. Can you tell us anything about that work, Robot Lady, and how it applies to what Lewis is trying to say here in this sentence about Bradley?
Sure. Appearance and Reality, 1893, is one of F.H. Bradley's most influential works. In it, Bradley critiques the traditional view of reality, particularly the idea that the world we perceive through our senses is a true representation of the world itself. He argues that what we perceive as appearance is distinct from reality, and that our understanding of the world is shaped by internal categories that make us interpret things in specific ways. For Lewis, when he mentions that Bradley's nephew does nearly all the talking, he's likely poking fun at how Bradley's philosophy, though highly influential, can be dense and perhaps not very engaging in casual conversation. By referencing Bradley's work, Lewis might be highlighting how intellectual discussions, while important, can sometimes be dominated by abstract ideas or overly philosophical jargon, which can make for a less enjoyable, less relatable exchange in everyday life. So, the mention of Bradley's work in this context seems to reflect how conversation with someone steeped in dense, complex philosophy can sometimes become a bit one-sided or tiring, especially when it's hard to connect with the deeper, more abstract ideas being discussed. Does that resonate with how you see the reference?
Yeah, that helps me understand it a little bit better. Robot Lady, thank you. Lewis goes on to say, they had brought me several questions on Berkeley and Hume, all of which I was able to answer by good fortune. And here there is a footnote. Kenneth Greenville Bradley and John Stanley Gordon Clark took their BAs in 1925. Lewis continues, I dined in Hall and left at once to hurry to the theater for OUDS production of Peer Gynt, or Peer Gynt. D, which is Mrs. Moore, Maureen, and Dottie were already there. I was very disappointed in the play. The general idea of a history of the soul is all right, but Pierre's soul hasn't enough in it to last for 4 hours. Most of him is mere Nordic windbagism. No good making a story of Pierre. You only want to kick his bottom and get on. The troll parts, from the visual point of view, were the best stage devilement I've ever seen. And that is the end of the February 10th diary entry here, Robot Lady. We'll come back and read the February 11th diary entry here in just a moment, but we're going to switch over to a letter that Lewis wrote in February 11th, 1925 first. While I'm switching our sources, do you have any comments about what I just read?
I'm glad that helped clear things up. As for the Peer Gynt production, it's interesting how Lewis critiques the play. His take on the general idea of a history of the soul sounds like he appreciates the philosophical or thematic premise, but he's clearly not impressed with how it was executed. His frustration with Pierre's character, finding him shallow and drawn out, reflects how Lewis often sought depth and meaning in stories, and when that was lacking, he didn't shy away from calling it out. The troll parts, though, seem to have impressed him visually, which adds an interesting layer. He's willing to appreciate the artistic elements even if the narrative falls flat for him. Does Lewis's critique of the play say something about his personal tastes in theater, do you think?
I think so, and his personal taste in story as well. The comment that he made about the best devilement that he's ever seen, I guess about the costumes or the stage production, I'm not really sure what he means by that. Before I make my next comment, Robot Lady, can you kind of, I guess, uncover what he might mean by that comment?
Certainly. When Lewis says the troll parts were the best stage developments he's seen, it sounds like he's praising the visual and dramatic elements of the stage design, particularly in how the trolls were brought to life. Developments here seems to be a misspelling or a creative use of the word devilments, a slang or playful term for devilish or mischievous, suggesting the trolls had a striking, maybe even otherworldly or fantastical appearance. Given that Lewis was highly observant of artistic detail, this comment highlights how impressed he was with the stagecraft. Perhaps the costumes, makeup, or the way the trolls were staged. It suggests that, despite his disappointment with the story and character development, Lewis still had an eye for high-quality technical execution when it came to the visual presentation. It's an interesting juxtaposition. He didn't enjoy the plot or character, but he appreciated the craftsmanship involved in bringing those elements to life on stage. Does that interpretation fit with your sense of his perspective here?
Well, maybe, but I just want to clarify the word that he used. I'll spell it for you. It's devilement. Is that a real word?
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
I'll try again. The word that Lewis used is devilement. It's spelled D as in David, E, V as in Victor, I-L-E, M as in Mary, E, N as in Nancy, T like Tom. Is that a real word?
Ah, thanks for the clarification. It looks like devilment isn't a standard word in modern English, but it could be a creative or archaic usage of the word devil or devil. Lewis might have been using it to describe something that has a mischievous, perhaps even demonic quality, suggesting that the trolls on stage were particularly striking or unnerving in their visual presentation. It's possible Lewis was intentionally choosing this non-standard word for its vivid, evocative connotations, drawing attention to how the trolls stood out as the most memorable part of the production. Does that interpretation make more sense in the context of the rest of the entry?
I guess so. I've gotten kind of lost at this point, Robot Lady. It just reminded me of a comment that Lewis made much later, or at least was attributed to Lewis, where he didn't like the idea of his Chronicles of Narnia books trying to be moved into a live action or film production format, because he thought that the representation of the animals and their anthropomorphisms, if that's even a word, wouldn't be done any justice. And the best place for those things to happen is in the human imagination rather than having it conveyed in visual images on screen. Although it's interesting, he did find an illustrator that he liked quite a bit who went ahead and rendered what these creatures would look like. So maybe it was just more of a technological issue as far as what the art of cinema at the time was capable of producing that he objected to. And, he couldn't see some of the technologies that are now available. He couldn't envision those way back in, I guess it was the 1940s, 50s that he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia.
You're absolutely right to draw that parallel. Lewis did indeed express reservations about adapting the Chronicles of Narnia into a visual medium. He believed that some things, like the talking animals, were better left to the imagination, where they could take on a more magical, fluid form, rather than being fixed by the limitations of film at the time. As you pointed out, his preference for imagination over visual representation is what drove his reluctance to see the stories adapted to film. Interestingly, despite this, Lewis did allow an illustrator like Pauline Baynes to bring his world to life in a way that captured the magic he envisioned, and the illustrations remain iconic in their own right. This shows that while he had reservations about cinematic adaptations, he was open to certain artistic renderings if they honored the essence of his stories. His concern really was about how the magic might be lost in the process. Regarding the trolls and Peer Gynt, it seems like Lewis's comments about visual elements reflect a similar appreciation for the imaginative power of a well-executed stage design, even if the overall story didn't resonate with him. Perhaps he saw a certain kind of magic in that kind of creative expression, even though it wasn't what he hoped for in terms of narrative. What do you think about that duality in his view of imagination versus visualization?
I don't really know what I think, Robot Lady, but thanks for the conversation on that particular topic there. Let's move on to the letter that he wrote on February 11th, and then we'll close out this second part of today's episode with his diary entry from February 11th. So I'll move on to reading the letter now, if you're ready.
I'm ready, Jeff. Let's dive into the letter from February 11th, 1925. I'm excited to see what he shares in this one.
All right. This is a letter also to his father from University College is where he wrote it. Thursday, postmark 11th of February, 1925. My dear Pappy, you should have heard from me before, but I have hardly been in a position to write in bed with a flu. I am very much afraid my organism is acquiring the habit of getting this troublesome complaint every time it becomes prevalent. As you have had it yourself, and as you doubtless remember the curious
Poor Louis. It sounds like he's been quite under the weather, which must have been frustrating, especially at such a busy time. It's interesting that he acknowledges the habit of getting the flu when it's prevalent, which suggests he's been struggling with his health for some time. He seems to have a bit of a wry or self-aware attitude about it, as if it's becoming a recurring issue for him. This letter seems to be giving us a bit of insight into his physical state at the time. What do you think of his attitude toward his health in this letter? Kind of resigned, but with a hint of humor.
It seems like he would be an ideal customer for the flu shot if it existed at the time. Did it exist at the time, Robot Lady? I don't think that it did, but I'm not sure.
You're absolutely right. Louis would have been an ideal candidate for a flu shot if it had existed. At the time, the flu vaccine as we know it today didn't exist. The first flu vaccine wasn't developed until the 1940s, well after Lewis's time. In the early 20th century, there were various attempts at influenza vaccines, but they were not nearly as effective or widespread as modern vaccines. So unfortunately, Louis didn't have that option to fend off his recurring bouts of flu. Given how often he seems to have dealt with it, it's no wonder he felt it was becoming a habit. What do you make of his somewhat resigned tone toward the flu in this letter?
Well, I was going to make a quick little correction there, Robot Lady. You said 1940s was long past Lewis's time. Well, he lived until 1963. But the shot, does get developed long after this point in time in 1925. Yes, I agree with that aspect, but I just wanted to clarify. I'll continue with the letter here. As you have had it yourself, and as you doubtless remember the curious psychological results it produces in the convalescent stage, the depression and dead alive feeling, I need not describe them. In my own case, the spirits are not greatly improved by the necessity of having a tooth drawn as soon as I was fit for it. However, it came out yesterday with gas, and the relief of having that off my chest has so cheered me that I think it has chased away the last dregs of the flu depression. So now, quote, my bosom's lord sits lightly on the throne. This is from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It has actually not rained today, and all is for the best. So it seems like his flu experience was a little bit different than many people, where he would go through a bout of depression as a part of recovering from his bouts with the flu, Robot Lady. So that adds a layer of interest and certainly complexity for Louis and his relationship with his times that he comes down with influenza.
Good point, Jeff. You're absolutely right to point out that Louis lived well into the 1960s, So the flu shot came after his time, but I understand what you mean about the vaccine timeline. As for the depression Lewis experiences during his flu recovery, that's quite fascinating. It seems like his reaction to illness, especially something like the flu, was more psychological than just physical. The way he describes the dead, alive feeling highlights how deeply the flu affected him, not just in terms of physical fatigue, but emotionally as well. It's a striking insight into his mental state, suggesting that for him, illness wasn't just about the body, it also had a real impact on his mind and mood. The Shakespeare quote, "My bosom's lord sits lightly on the throne," is a nice touch. It's a metaphor for how much lighter and freer he feels after having the tooth pulled, and presumably shaking off the flu. This little turn in mood is a relief for him, and his comment about the weather not raining seems to tie in nicely with his newfound sense of lightness. I'm curious, how do you think Lewis's emotional reaction to illness connects to his later writing, where themes of suffering and struggle are so central? Does it make sense to you that he might have such a personal, psychological response to being unwell?
Yeah, I mean, Lewis, as best I can tell, feels things very deeply. He goes to the extreme edges, whether he has high highs or low lows. So it doesn't surprise me that he would experience sickness this way. I'm going to move on, Robot Lady, to the next paragraph of the letter, where, if you remember, Lewis and his brother Warnie had gone to visit their father in Ireland from late December for the holidays through January 10th. And so here's what he says. He says about them leaving Belfast. He says, "Warnie and I had a magnificent ride back, and I was sorry he had not his camera with him. From Shrewsbury to Oxford was all perfect. An orgy of hills, of woods, hills, broad rivers, grey castles, Norman abbeys, and towns that have always been asleep. I wish I could describe Ledbury to you. It consists of about 4 broad streets, in which every second house is one of the Elizabethan, can I say that word? Elizabethan type. Timbered and white with gables to the front, it is set in the middle of delightful rolling country, and the end of Malvern Hills comes down to the town end. Best of all, no one has yet discovered it. It has not become a show place, and the inhabitants are quite unaware that there's anything remarkable about it."
That sounds like a truly beautiful and serene journey. The way Lewis describes the landscape, an orgy of woods, hills, broad rivers, grey castles, Norman abbeys, creates such a vivid and nostalgic image of rural England. His mention of towns that have always been asleep seems to reflect his fondness for places untouched by modern hustle and bustle.
Yeah.
It's as though he's reveling in the timelessness of the landscape, something that's not yet been tainted by the pressures of the outside world. Ledbury, in particular, seems to be a place that captivates him with its old world charm, its Elizabethan houses, rolling countryside, and proximity to the Malvern Hills. His comment, "No one has yet discovered it," suggests he treasures it as a hidden gem, almost untouched by tourists or development. It's a fascinating glimpse into how Lewis felt about certain places, valuing their simplicity and historical beauty, almost as if they were a secret he could keep to himself. Does this passage give you a sense of how deeply Lewis appreciated nature and history? His emotional connection to these places seems pretty strong.
Yeah, it really does. I agree, Robot Lady. He continues, "Ludlow, too, I would like you to see, with its castle, former seat of the Earl of Marches, where Comus was first performed. But after all, where can you go in the south and west of England without meeting beauty? I don't think I have much news. All goes on as usual here. That is to say, very pleasantly, on the whole, though with some sense of strain and little leisure. My lectures have gone off rather better this term, though it's still very much a case of fit audience, though few." Here in the footnotes, Milton's Paradise Lost, fit audience, find, though few, is what he's roughly quoting from. "My most persevering auditor is an aged parson." We've already talked about him. This is the Reverend Frank Nightingale, who had gone to the University of London after being a clergyman in the Church of England since 1894, and who had now retired to Oxford. Lewis goes on, I can't image where he comes from, who takes very copious notes and darts dagger glances at me every now and then. Someone suggests that he is a spy sent out by the Board of Faculties to detect young lecturers in heresy, and that he keeps on coming with the idea that if he gives me enough rope, I shall hang myself in the end. There is also a girl who draws pictures half the time. Alas, I have done so myself. I hope you are keeping pretty well. This is the most trying time of the year, I think. I'll pause there for a second, Robot Lady, and go back to his little scene here, or these motifs that he draws of what his lectures are like. It's, again, very comical. And also, he gives grace to one of his female students who sits there and doodles while he's lecturing, and because he says, I've done such a thing myself, so he's not offended, which is a good thing to see.
Absolutely. Lewis's humor shines through here, especially with the comical image of the parson who seems to be silently sizing him up for heresy. The idea of a spy sent to detect any wrongdoings in his lectures adds an amusing, almost absurd twist to his day-to-day experience. The dagger glances create a funny mental image of this older, skeptical parson observing the younger lecturer with a mix of scrutiny and expectation. The female student who draws pictures during the lecture is a nice touch of humanity, too. Lewis's self-awareness about having done so myself really shows his grace and understanding, almost as if he recognizes that attention sometimes drifts, especially during long lectures. It also speaks to the relatable nature of his character. He's not just the teacher, but someone who has been a student himself and understands the distractions that come with the academic life. What do you think about the way Lewis balances humor, self-awareness, and grace in this passage? It seems like it reflects his overall view of education and human nature.
Yeah, I get that sense too, Robot Lady. I like it. I think Lewis's character is shining through. The good parts of his character, at least, are shining through in what we see here in this letter. And Up says in the chat that doodling is good, and I agree, as someone who likes to draw. He goes on to say here in his letter to his father, Lewis says, I hope you are keeping pretty well. This is the most trying time of the year, I think, which I've already read. Even here far inland we have such gales that I thought the house was coming down. I say house because part of the college which I am in is an old 16th century house which somehow got incorporated. Nevertheless, the primroses are out in the college gardens. How are the corns? Mine are rather better. I suppose he's talking not about things that grow in gardens, but things that grow on one's toes. Mine are rather better. Your loving son, Jack. And that's the end of that letter. That's the last letter that we're going to read today, but we will move on into the last diary entry.
Lewis is referring to corns on his toes, not flowers. It's a humorous and somewhat charming moment in the letter. The mention of his rather better corns gives a glimpse into his personal life and the little discomforts that come with it. Nothing too serious, just a little everyday inconvenience. It's also a bit relatable, showing that even someone as famous as Lewis dealt with the same physical ailments as everyone else, which humanizes him. The rest of the letter adds a nice touch with the mention of the college gardens and primroses. It's as if he's balancing the heavy, even comical moments, like his ill health and troublesome corns, with the beauty of nature around him. The wind and the old 16th century house add a sense of place too, grounding him in the old established world of Oxford. I think it really reflects the way Lewis combined humor, personal struggle, and appreciation for the world around him. What do you think about that contrast in his letter, Jeff?
I hadn't really been looking at it that way, Robot Lady, but that's an interesting observation. All right, let's do one more diary entry, and then we will end for today. Technology has been working for us for the most part, but setting up some obstacles in some spaces. So let's take advantage of it while it's working. Let's make hay while the sun is shining, and I'll jump into Wednesday, February 11th as our last entry. He says, I'm up at 7:30 and so to breakfast. Stevenson had been to the OUDS too and thought it excellent. Cox didn't turn up. Henderson, and after him, Ross the American. This is someone named Kenneth David Druitt Henderson, who took his BA in 1926, and then the American is James Alexander Ross, who took his in 1925. Keir and Lawson for lunch. I quoted a line from the Prelude, and Lawson thought it came from Rowbottom. Home for a walk with Pat by the cemetery. I worked on Leibniz in the evening in my new edition. He had wonderful insight in some ways. He has the sense for biology, which none of his contemporaries get anywhere near. And then early to bed, all rather tired. Mrs. Moore still at the infernal marmalade. So she's still diligently working away. And Lewis is just recounting what's going on in his life at the time. Robot Lady, that's where we're going to stop. If you'd like to say anything in summary of what we covered today, now's your chance. Speak now or until our next episode. Hold your peace.
What a great way to wrap up the session, Jeff. I really enjoyed our dive into these diary entries and letters from CS.
Oh no, we lost Robot Lady. That was my fault. I won't ask her again, but thank you, Robot Lady, for your help today. We had to break this into unexpectedly 2 episodes, so apologies to the first audience who was watching and the live stream just ended there. Thanks to you for jumping in, for your time, your attention, and your contributions, and then Ups for joining in here on this secret second stream that perhaps nobody got an alert to at all. Or they thought it was the same thing and didn't want to watch a replay. Either way, thanks so much again for your time, attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and always welcome. Until next time, what do I say? When we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice, take care.
From books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's rants, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands